Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic show. It's episode 443. We've got a small panel, but a powerful panel. Almost all the rest of the panel are at WordCamp USA, swanning around, enjoying themselves. But I've got a small but powerful team of old-timers that decided that the show must go on. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Sallie, would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners and viewers?
Certainly. I am Sallie Goetsch, rhymes with sketch, the WP fangirl, organizer of the East Bay WordPress meetup in Oakland, California. Minion to two felines.
Exactly. And I've got my friend John Locke. John, would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners and viewers?
John Locke, SEO practitioner for manufacturing firms at Lockdown Design and SEO.
Right. And before we go into the main content of the show, I'd like to talk about one of our great sponsors. And that is, I've just had a brain.
Is that Breezy? Or
Breezy, Breezy. So thank you so much. I'm sorry, it's been a busy week. It's been a hell of a week for me. It's Breezy, breezy.co. And what Breezy is, it's a page builder. And I think it's one of the more interesting and has some really unique features that will be of interest to you, the developer stroke designer, and if you're a power user as well. So go over to breezy.com, have a look at what they got, buy one of their packages, and I don't think you're going to be disappointed. Like I say, they're pushing ahead. They've got a pretty large team developing Breezy all the time. They're a serious player in this area. They should be considered. So go over to Breezy and have a look what they're offering. And thank you so much, Sallie. I had one of those old age brain farts.
Yes.
Well, obviously, story one is WordCamp US 2019. Sallie, was there, will you be watching it from afar? And secondly, are any of the talks and that took your eye and you thought that was really interesting?
Well, I would have loved to be there for the, the community day where they've got a lot of stuff aimed at meetup organizers, and there's a lot of good stuff happening. I mean, as often, I wish I could go. It just was not possible this year. I've been on too many planes already, and don't have anybody to sponsor the expense involved in that.
Yeah, where is it going to be next year?
I think next year is St. Louis again. I think this is the first year in St. Louis, so it's it's a not impossible distance. It's sort of like, well, perhaps next year. That's how it keeps coming up in my mind. I mean, it would be nice if it came out toward the west, but venues tend to be prohibitively expensive around here, and and probably nobody wants to come to California right this minute for fear of burning up. So
yeah. So is there any of the speakers or any of the other things? Do you notice any of them? Will you be watching any of the stuff?
I don't know if I'll be watching, because I have a lot of work I need to do, and I have to be out tomorrow. I will certainly watch the State of the Word, but I may not watch it live. Depends on when I get back tomorrow. But they've got a lot of great stuff about all of the current kinds of things, and a lot of people I know are speaking, and a lot of people I know are going to be there. I mean, certainly, although it's a bit late to say so now, would encourage anybody who can get to WordCamp US to go to WordCamp US.
Right. John, anything? Well, it was a difficult WordCamp last year, wasn't it? There was a certain tone to it. I think this year's going to be a bit better.
Well, I think people went in with a lot of tension and a lot of emotion about the introduction of Gutenberg, and I don't think there's that kind of, I don't think anybody is stressed in that same way this year. So it should be a little less tense.
Yeah. What do you reckon, John?
All right. Yeah, I'm not traveling. I've been to St. Louis before. It's a nice town. I like it. Good city. I'm I'm not going to be watching it because, like Sallie, like you, I have some stuff to catch up on. I'm a little busy here, which is fine.
We're workers. We're workers, aren't we?
We're grinding it out, man. That's what I'm saying. We're down in the trenches. There's a couple sessions that I think that if I was there, that I would probably be watching. One is creating a welcoming and diverse space.
Oh yeah, I went to the preview of that. It's really good. It's worthwhile.
Yeah, that's Ali Nimmons. I'm gonna say this name wrong, I'm sure. Aruba Ahmed, Jill Binder, and David Wolfpaw. David Wolfpaw is a past guest of the Tonic from like a long time ago. Nice guy. The other one, it was Corey Ashton is doing one. A mama lesbian and an entrepreneur walk into a WordCamp. I think I would like to see that too, because Corey's going through treatment for cervical cancer, which is no bueno. No. But I, you know what? She is resiliently positive. Yeah. Aside from that, yeah.
John's got a furry friend in the background.
Yes, you're about to be upstaged.
Oh, he wants to join us. She wants to join us.
Yeah, it's a she.
It's a she. That was her comment. So what does she think about WordCamp USA then, John?
Oh, Hazel? Hazel, she has no opinions on it.
All right. Yeah. All right, there we go. Very understandable. All right. On to the next story. And Flash is responsible for the internet most creative era. And before, it kind of really connected to me because I got into the internet by being a mature student of multimedia and graphic design at the London School of Print and Design, which is no longer, it merged with, I think, Upminster University, but it was old trade school. And I got into it and I did my degree there and I did my master's there. And I was really, my first gigs, my first jobs were Flash. And for my post degree, I did a couple of large projects in Flash and I was totally absorbed by it. And I was heavily influenced by the Japanese designers. Some of the leading Flash designers were based in Japan. And their work was just amazing. And I agree with the article. I thought Flash, it was hated in a way, but also I thought some of the work that was done in Flash was some of the most creative I've ever seen. And I think the internet in general, in some ways, when it comes to design, has got a bit boring. What do you reckon, John?
You know, when I saw this article, I really responded to it because I think not only Flash, but like a lot of elements of the web were, I don't know, it seems to, web design now, I mean, there still are some really innovative sites, but I'd say like 90% of sites are really cookie cutter at this point. It's really kind of sad. I think back to when I was just a consumer, not a web developer or anything like that, but in the late 90s and the early 2000s, seeing sites like heavy.com, they would use Flash animation to tell stories. I thought there was a lot of innovative stuff going on. There used to be like a lot of games and stuff that were, you know, Flash based. I thought those were really cool at the time. You know, I think the tools have evolved and there's different things that we can do now with JavaScript and the CSS. CSS has really evolved. So I think there is still creativity. I think we, you know, got to keep pushing ourselves to, you know, be creative and not just be cookie cutter.
Yeah, what do you reckon, Sallie?
Well, I mean, I got into the web before Flash existed. And when I went back and, you know, listened to Resilient Design about the evolution of the internet and so on, I mean, you know, Flash was extremely creative. There were a lot of interesting things done. But the problem is it was always kind of antithetical to what the web was supposed to be. And so, you know, it's good that now there are ways to do some similarly creative things that are, more accessible and responsive and so on and so forth. And, and a lot of Flash was just annoying. Oh, our restaurant has to have this splash page that is completely meaningless and takes forever to load. And so, it's a mixed situation, like everything else. And a lot of early web design was kind of a matter of attempting to make the web fit other models that we already had, to make the web look more like print. And this is how we ended up with the all the table layouts and frames and this and that. And that was not actually ever what things were meant to be, but because that was the experience that people had. And it's still the experience people have to a great degree, and they get frustrated by the fact that it doesn't work the same way. And yeah, I think we have a lot of websites now that are visually very similar, and people have put less creativity into them than they should. And at the same time, we also have more experience of what is usable for people and what is going to accomplish the goals you have put the website up there for. And you don't necessarily want to go into a grocery store and be astounded by its creative layout. You want to, because you want to like be able to find things and get through the store. And and if you have an experience like IKEA, where they force you to go through the entire store in order to get out of there, it's mostly just really irritating. So I think that you need to apply your creativity where it's appropriate and where it's not going to hamper, accomplishing your mission or people doing what they went there to do.
Yeah, I think they were all good points. Excellent points, Sallie. It's just that I also agree with John. Is the consequences is a lot of sites do look very cutty cooker.
Right. Well, we also have a lot of businesses online now that weren't on the web before. It's
True.
Pretty much in the early days, if you were on the web, you were much more likely to be somebody at the cutting edge of something where more creativity was appropriate.
True. Right, let's go on to the next story. This is the interesting one. We analysed 5.2 million desktop and mobile pages. Here's what we learnt about page speed, and it's from Backlinko. He's a very well-known SEO individual in the SEO world, and really, just to give you some quick background, listeners and viewers, he came heavy on in this article. He got really quite heavy on WordPress around speed, saying it basically it was a bit of a dog, basically, compared to some hosted solutions. What did you reckon about this article, Sallie?
Well, it's and I'm sure John will have better insight on this, but in a way, it is also kind of like this is news. I mean, there's been such a move in the WordPress community for years to deal with the fact that any kind of dynamic solution where you've got a lot of communicating back and forth with a database is going to be slower than a static solution. And this is why, there's all the caching and the hosting companies that do server-side caching and the Gatsby solutions and that kind of thing. Plus, WordPress being widely used for things is also, used by a lot of people who know nothing about trying to optimize their website. And so I think it's, it's interesting that they go into so much depth, but, I found the article in the newsletter, along with a commentary about how it seemed like some of what they looked at, or some of the way they broke down what they looked at, didn't make a lot of sense from a CMS perspective, but that, it's like, yeah, well, if you've worked with WordPress, WordPress can be slow and can be a resource hog, and which doesn't mean that you shouldn't use it, just that you have to be aware of that as a possible downside. And also, I think, probably more of the people who are on Wix are building like, your 5-page brochure site, and there's just not a lot happening there. There wouldn't be a lot happening there if it was a WordPress site.
Yeah, I think like I said previously with the previous story, I think they're great points. Before I throw it over to John, I just think the key factor is, using decent hosting, fundamentally. I think a lot of sites, a lot of people, they just go for the cheapest solution. I'm not going to name them, but there's a number of hosting providers.
But the hosting company is not sponsoring WP-Tonic?
Well, they're the ones that I think provide really quality hosting, beloved Kinsta, but there's a bit of a price hump from, something like Kinsta to what a lot of hosting providers say. They say it's wonderful hosting for $3 a month. Yeah, it isn't wonderful hosting at $3 a month. It's pretty crappy hosting. What do you reckon, John?
Yeah, there are some interesting things in here. I'll add this too for people who don't know. Brian Dean, Backlinko, a lot of people reference his material for SEO and stuff like that. But how he came to prominence was as Neil Patel's first disciple. That's why if you look at old versions of Neil Patel's site, it resembles the exact layout that Brian Dean still kind of uses now. Neil Patel's site is a little bit different, but they are interconnected. That is how this.
And we have had some discussions about Mr. Patel before.
Right. Okay. So that in mind, a good article, as Jonathan pointed out, WordPress scores down at the bottom because I believe that the majority of sites that are hosted on WordPress are on things that are lower end hosts, and they're not on something like Kinsta or Pagely or whatever. They're on low end hosts that cost like $3 or $5 a month. And what happens is you're sharing server resources with as many other sites as they can cram into that server so they can make money. So there might be like 100,000 other sites on that same server instance. So they're noticeably slower. Okay, so some of the things that he says here, talking about speed and this and that. The very first thing he talks about is time to first byte. The average time to first byte, that is how long it takes the site. Like if you type in WP-Tonic.com or WPFangirl.com or whatever it is, time to first byte is how long it takes the browser to start downloading assets from the server to create the web page. And what they found is the average time to first byte is 1.28 seconds, which is unbelievably slow compared to the types of sites that us on the panel are building. And that's a lot of it is down to who you're hosting with. So a good time to first byte, I would say, is like under 300 milliseconds. But for SEO purposes, you really have to beat your the next person that's a competitor in your field. You don't have to be ridiculously fast. You don't have to have like 50 milliseconds, but you do have to beat your competition. Time to first byte is what most people feel is a correlation between that part of the page speed. When people talk about page speed affecting SEO, they feel that time to first byte is the most important part. I would say that when you've improved everything else on a client site and then you move into better hosting, I can say that they do get a bump from that. Speed itself is not going to be a substitute for content or design or links or anything like that. But the other thing that I would say is really important is time to first paint, or time to first meaningful paint, which is when people start seeing stuff appear on their screen. The perception of speed is very, very important. You want to have that part be fast. So that is more involved with how the site is built. And I'm not sure, you know, everything about like Squarespace or anything like that, or some of these that were at the top. But WordPress does have, it's kind of in the middle as far as how many files it typically takes to put together a page. And there's lots of things you can do to speed up.
And I found, I don't know if you found this, Sally and John, is that if you're dealing with something that's been knocked up with, you know, certain kind of themes that you can still get from Theme Forest.
Let's load 50 extra scripts on this page and every other page too.
Yeah, and it's on really poor hosting, which will rename, you know, related to my ex-father, or some other hosting providers. That will name, you know, might be linked to Blue Wells and who knows. But if you go with that combination of some enormous bloated, and then you put a page builder on top, and then you add like 50 to 80 plugins, and it's really quite easy to get there. You know, we've all done it. I've done. There's quite a few plugins on the WP-Tonic website.
Yeah, most of the sites I build have quite a few plugins. I mean, it's either
you
their code or mine.
And that's excluded.
Code is code.
Yeah, that's excluding if it's a WooCommerce site. It's really quite easy to end up with a appalling concoction of stuff, isn't it, Sally? It's really quite easy to end up with a real dog's breath of a website, isn't it?
Yes, and it is, you know, I mean, the issue is not the number of plugins, but the quality of the plugins and how well they're built. But yes, because for people, you know, WordPress is marketed to people who don't have a lot of experience, and they will sort of grab the first thing they see or the thing that was bundled into their theme. Or the or the thing that's popular partly because it's free, and then, you know, they'll add something else and it doesn't play well together, and yeah, all of a sudden you've got issues up the wazoo.
Like last site I personally onboarded onto one of our maintenance plans, they had over 20 inactive plugins. Just
sitting around waiting for a vulnerability.
I said, yeah, we did. You know, they had about 15 themes installed. So, you know, put it on a test rig and then start. You know, and also they still load a little bit, don't they? They're still taking some resources up, aren't they? They've got to go, aren't they?
Yeah.
So start stripping away.
Yes, that getting rid of clutter stuff and making sure, I mean, it's sometimes I'm working on stuff and I test a bunch of different things, and then I have to remember to like uninstall all the ones that I didn't use and clean up the database and that kind of stuff. But yeah, you will get things where, you know, it's like, this is sitting, okay, so that plugin hasn't been updated for, you know, 5 years, and nobody, you know, was running a check on stuff to make sure. And it's like, well, it wasn't obviously broken.
Yeah, and there was, and I've, you know, I kind of on the cheaper end, I kind of recommend SiteGround, but they've done something really, that their new login interface for a lot of which they've introduced to a lot of their WordPress website.
Yes, I haven't used it yet, but their replacement for cPanel, because I guess cPanel's pricing
it's pretty
skyrocketed.
It's pretty doggy, and the login page is unsecure.
How odd.
And it's storing memory. I think Mary Ann from I forgot the name of her podcast. She does a great weekly roundup of different things going on in WordPress, you know, and I do watch her Facebook and listen to her podcast. And I did ask her on the show, but I haven't got a response. But as she pointed this out, it was a terrible freaking idea. And so they're okay SiteGround if you really, really are on a tight budget. But they just do a special deal for the first year. But then it goes up quite considerably. And I think you're not going to get anything that fantastic below $20, actually. I'm sorry, per month. And you can get it a bit cheaper if you pay yearly, which they all mostly want you to do. But the idea that you're going to get anything below $10 that's any worth really is pretty, you're deluding yourself, I think. But,
well, right. And it does kind of come down to, do you have a business or a hobby? Maybe you don't want to spend more than a few bucks a month on your hobby.
Yeah.
If you have a business that can't cover $20 a month in hosting, I'm not sure you have a business.
If you spend more on coffee in a week than you do on hosting in a month, there's a problem.
I think that's well put. And it just will, this concoction we've just discussed will lead to a real dog of a website. It's just seen it so many times. Well, we're going to go for a break. Got some more stories in the second half. We'll be back in a few moments, folks. We're coming back. I recovered from the spooks and the witches and the wizards last night.
Yes, well, you're fortunate that I decided to put my face on instead of eating breakfast because, I was looking like a Halloween leftover.
I'm not going there. And also, I'm looking forward to the real celebration, the 5th of December. Viva Vendetta. Right, good old Guy Fawkes. You want to look him up, listeners and viewers? He came to a sticky end, and we celebrate it in England, or we used to.
Yes, well, although most of my friends when I lived in England said now if he'd succeeded at blowing up Parliament, that would be something to celebrate.
Ooh, I don't agree with that. I'm a supporter of Parliament. There we go.
Well, I'm a supporter of it, of its existence, not necessarily of all of its decisions, but then that's true in.
There we go. Yes. All right, on to the next story. And we're coming. We've had Black Thursday, whatever it's called, and we've got Cyber Friday, whatever it's called. But this is a time of year where there's a lot of discounts offered for WordPress plugins and all sorts of services. So I thought I'd put this article in, and it's basically SEMrush versus Ahrefs, which is the best SEO and marketing tool going into 2020. And I also would include a tool that both me and John uses called KW Finder. I think though the two and KW Finder are the three main tools I would recommend people. And you might, SEMrush doesn't normally offer many discounts, but I think this time of year might be the one time where you might get a substantial discount. So what do you reckon, John? What do you reckon if you were looking this time of year to buy? Would you agree with me, the three I've just mentioned are the three main players?
I mean, yeah, definitely. Like, I can tell you what my stack is. Now, a couple of years ago, I did use SEMrush, but I became an Ahrefs convert. I think this article comes to the conclusion it's either like, I think they gave the slight edge to SEMrush, and I'm not sure that I agree with that.
They seem to have done a fairly decent job going through sort of feature by feature, saying, this one is a little better here, this one is a little better there. That's still going to be partly a matter of opinion and your own experience.
And taste, isn't it?
But it did at least, kind of break it down in what they think each one is better for, which is useful because that the generic question, which is better, is pretty useless. Like, well, better for what?
Yeah.
Well, both
I can tell.
Go on. Sorry, John. Go on.
Oh, it's fine. I can tell you that as far as just the interface, I mean, I like Ahrefs better. Their link database, their crawler is the most robust outside of Google, and Majestic would be a close second. Like Moz is actually the worst as far as detecting,
which is interesting because Moz just like started charging money for a bunch of things that used to be free.
Yeah. Well, like Moz Local too, like people don't know this, Moz Local, they're no longer using their own software. They're outsourcing that to another company now.
I didn't
Called
know
Uber.
that. I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
called Uberall. That's why it's totally different now. But that's just completely white labeled. SEMrush. Here's one of the things that I have a pet peeve about with SEMrush. They, a lot of people use this tool, and a lot of people are like, oh, SEMrush is saying all these links are toxic. I should disavow these like right away. And this is seriously, you go in forums and like every week people are saying this, asking these questions. But people ask me these, questions personally. Don't use the disavow tool willy-nilly, because it's not going to do anything, and it doesn't do anything. A lot of people, believe that it does, but it does not. I'm telling you this. All it does is it basically marks your site as a site that's broken the rules. So only disavow if it's the nuclear option. I'm telling you, I'm not kidding when I say this.
No, but I'm just laughing. That's a great thing to do, isn't it? To mark it up.
Well, people don't get it. Google is not your friend. I mean, they can't figure out everything on their own. So they're expecting you to do it. And in fact, in this new version of Search Console, they're taking away the disavow tool because as Google representatives John Mueller and Danny Sullivan have said, more people have shot themselves in the foot by using it and hurt their sites by disavowing links that they think are spammy or toxic, that are just natural links. I mean, the fact of it is you're not going to stop scraper sites or things like that. So if you're disavowing stuff like that, that's all you're going to be doing, like all day long, every day. And all you really need to do is build some actually strong links, and those spammy links will just bounce off like they're nothing. The only time they hurt you is when that's the only types of links you have. Now, when it comes to some of the things I like Ahrefs for is you can compare competitor sites head to head. I mean, as far as like the keyword research and keyword difficulty, I always double source, which is why I use KW Finder to look at keyword difficulty on top of that, because they actually pull in stuff. They pull in information from Moz and from Majestic, but they also have a proprietary scores for each site or each page, like a link profile strength. That's their own proprietary thing. But I like KW Finder too.
It's got a nice, for somebody on my level,
yeah.
I find these other two products, they're great for you because you're doing this every day, every week. But I'm just
yeah. I'm not saying SEMrush is bad. That would be my second choice, but I mean, it's not my first choice.
I like KV because the interface and it's a great. But what about price? What do you think I'm right? This time of year is for most of these products is the only time normally that sometimes you can get a special deal, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean sometimes there's always like deals. I mean, but if you're like if you're a professional SEO, I mean, you're going to end up paying, something like, for most people who are starting off, and I know a lot of people are trying to add SEO as a service, like in the WordPress community, a lot of people are trying to add this as another service that they're doing. I think SEMrush, you get like 10 projects or whatever. It's like $199, and I know like Ahrefs, it's like 10 projects and it's like $179. And then the next bump up on Ahrefs it's like $399 a month for 25 projects. And then SEMrush is $399 for, doesn't say how many projects. But basically the pricing is almost exactly the same is what I'm saying. You're going to be paying that much. You need at least one multi-purpose tool that tracks links, tracks competitors' rankings, can tell you content gap, maybe does a little bit of keyword analysis as far as like how heavy is this competition. I think a lot of people in WordPress are gravitating toward SEMrush because I think keyword research, the interface for that is a little bit more friendly. It has like this mind map type thing where you type in a keyword and then it does this like kind of flower.
I'm a total sucker for mind maps.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people gravitate
semantic
toward that.
clouds and that kind of visualization.
Semantic cloud. I mean, a lot of people gravitate toward that, which is fine. I mean, for me, for the writing I do for myself, or the writing that I do for clients, I've never had to dive that deep because, I see a lot of the questions that come in for my own clients, and I know what the questions I get for myself. So I'm never at a loss for like what content to make. So, but I could, I understand why if people who gravitate toward
the Ahrefs is more utilitarian in look, isn't it? Where the SEMrush is a little bit more flowery and pleasant. The Ahrefs is utilitarian, but they're both extremely powerful. And I would go with Ahrefs, like what you suggest, with KV. I think KV Finder with Ahrefs is really a powerful combination, isn't it, John?
Yeah, that's my stack. So
I'm in agreement. We're all in agreement. Well, let's go on to the story. I just thought that was an interesting one for this time of year. So on to number 5, the future of freelancing with WordPress. What did you reckon about this one, Sallie?
I was a little underwhelmed.
Yeah.
Also, it is kind of interesting. I mean, it's like, yes, there are some things that people are concerned about, but what he seems to be mostly talking about is not people who are freelancers, like I am, and build sites for others or offer services, but people who create products. And that, if you make a WordPress product, a plugin, or a SaaS product or something that does something, and it has to compete with sort of the official pushed through Jetpack, whatever version of it, then that's going to be really hard for you. And that's absolutely true. I just don't think making products is freelancing.
No. Well, it is kind of, but not the way they kind of, I agree with everything you've just said. I think that's one of the key problems with this article. What do you reckon, John?
Yeah, what I got out of this is basically just saying, like, where is WordPress going? What if you're a freelancer, what should you do? I mean, like I said, like me and you, we're working on a project right now that's a Gutenberg. I mean, it's not terrible, but everything evolves. I mean, WordPress itself is evolved. When it first started, it was basically just a blog. And it still kind of has a lot of those roots still. A lot of stuff's been bolted onto it, whether it's a REST API or Gutenberg or custom post types or everything else that's been bolted onto this.
I just want to butt in slightly, John. As I was reading this article quickly, one of the guests, the past about time flies, it must have been about 4 or 5 months ago, I had Dave Froy on the show, and he does a membership site around training designer power users to use Animator, right? Mm-hmm. And it's called No Stress WordPress. And he's a really lovely guy. He's comes from the north of England. He's got a really kind of northy accent, and he just comes across really well. He was ex-teacher before he became a developer. And he just got a good way of explaining things. And I've been diving deep into Animator. So I was thinking maybe joining his course. And he was doing a free webinar. And he normally uses Zoom, but he gone with a new company. I've got the name of the webinar product, but he was using this. And he got over 3,000 people sign up for this intro course, right? And he took down the whole webinar system. It crashed midway, and he responded. He had a virtual assistant helping him, and they really responded. They worked out they probably needed a backup just in case. You probably learnt this from arrows in his back. And they converted back to Zoom. And Zoom might not have the greatest interface, but, you know, touch wood. Hopefully I'm not risking this particular episode to go down in the next few seconds. One thing about Zoom is most of the time it's pretty rock solid, isn't it? But
I can't remember we've ever had it crash or anything.
Not
like
really,
that.
not, you know, hopefully next week we don't have problems. But what I'm saying is he had over 3,000 people join him. And this isn't, you know, Dave's a great guy and he's built up a great business, but he's not a household name, is he, in personal development? But I've never had, and I know he's totally truthful. So when he said we've had over 3,000 people sign for this webinar, I'm pretty confident that he did have 3,000 people sign up for it, right? And he's not like certain individuals which kind of massage the truth. But it just shows me if you're in the right area, that there's an enormous demand around anything around WordPress if you're in the right sector.
Well, look at our friend Adam Preeser,
exactly.
WP Crafter. This guy is blown up. I mean, completely. I think he is of anybody in the WordPress ecosystem. I think the only channel that has more followers and views than him right now is WP Beginner, and he's going to overtake them within the year.
Yeah, because he knocks out really good stuff, and
yeah,
you know,
but it's all the same type of thing, like Elementary and stuff.
Yeah, I really like Adam. He can be a bit prickly when he wants to be, but you know, he produces great stuff. And
what,
he has,
like the rest of us?
Sorry.
I said, unlike the rest of us.
Yeah,
well, no,
exactly.
what I mean is, you know, he's in the video. No, I didn't really mean that, Sally. He's in the video area, and it does take, you know, to get a perfect. You know, I just do a little bit of editing, and I knock these shows out. He's spending him and his editor, and I think he still edits the shows himself. He does a full edit, and that takes a lot of work. But the other thing is, he's very dynamic, and he produces. It's entertaining, the actual shows, and he knows his stuff, and he does his research. And we all know doing all that research and really pre-show preparation is a hell of a load of work if you're going to do it properly.
It is a shed load of work.
It is a hell.
I mean, if you want to do that well, you have to work at it. It's not going to be just, you know.
And he's very consistent. I'm sounding like a fanboy for him, but the only reason why I'm bringing this up is also I think he has faced a lot of envy and jealousy in some elements of the WordPress community based on his success. But that you always get that in any field. But what I'm saying is, like why I think John pointed out about Adam is that, you know, people get a bit gloomy about certain sections. I think if you were, I think there'll always be a place for custom design for people that want a bespoke solution. I think the market for that has probably diminished over the past couple of years a bit. I think, you know, Wix and Squarespace has taken. I think where it has hurt a bit is a lot of local agencies that might have hired a freelance developer to do a kind of semi-custom theme or do a hatchet job on a pre-bought theme to customize it so they could give it to the customer. They are probably going to Squarespace and getting their designer to knock something up on Squarespace rather than hiring a freelance developer. What do you reckon, John?
You know, the agencies I know, like personally, still, a lot of them are. It's kind of a mix. Like when I first broke in, like 5 or 6 years ago, most of the agency, I would say, like half the agencies were just knocking up theme forest themes, and some of them were doing bespoke. But with Beaver Builder and now Elementor is getting really, really popular.
Big, isn't it?
Big. But I think there's some agencies that just knock up Divi. But I think a lot of agencies are doing Elementor or Beaver Builder at this point. You know, some are still using like Visual Destroyer. types of sites from Theme Forest. Some are doing bespoke. I'll point this out too. You know, I think that there is going to still always be a place for custom design. This was something that I saw online in a Facebook group just the other day. It was somebody asking about Elementor, like, how do you do this? And they were pointing at a site, and it was a agency knocked up this custom site for like a video production or photography like site, high end. And it's one of those sites that you would think that it would be an agency site, like a big time agency, or it'd be a site that you'd see on the CSS side of the day or something like that, because it's like custom scrolling. Like if you do all this like fancy stuff, you'd scroll and like elements to, you know, do like this, you know, fancy thing, and there's a video going in the background, and there's all kinds of like stuff fading in and out, but it was like more fancy than what I'm describing.
Sounds like an epileptic fit waiting to happen.
Yeah, I get it, but you know what? But like in the big time agencies, in the large agencies, or the people who are like worship at the altar of design, these are the types of things that they look at for inspiration. Like those are the things that
explains a lot, doesn't it?
It really, really does. But I was just thinking in my head, like, there's no effing way that people could do this with Elementor out of the box. But that's what, you know, that's kind of the expectation. Those are things that you have to know CSS, and you have to know JavaScript and things like this to make this work. So that's what I'm saying. You know, a lot of people say like, you just use a page builder to like build sites, and that'll work if you're just doing small business sites, and that'll work up to a certain point. But you're never going to get those $30,000, $50,000, $100,000 sites if you're just using page builders, and the expectation is that you're going to like knock up something like that. So
yeah, it's true. There's all skills. What do you reckon, Sallie?
Well, I mean, I think where people are losing business to folks who decide to do it themselves is almost always on the lower end.
Yeah.
And, you know, there is work in that area, and that is where a lot of people start out. You know, somebody, you know, asks you to build a website and pays you a few bucks for it. And you know, and that can be harder to compete on. On the other hand, you know, I was just, I'm in a Slack group for PR professionals, and one of them was talking about how, you know, recently someone had come back to them after, you know, they'd pitched a plan to these people. The people had attempted to take the plan and implement it themselves, and now they were kind of crawling back because they couldn't make it work, because yes, you actually need to be a professional and know stuff to do this. So sometimes having people do it themselves is actually the best marketing for you. It just takes a little longer. And that is going to happen. And yes, you know, we do need to be trying to keep up with new skills. And there's a lot of discussion about, so are you, you know, using Gutenberg with your clients, and, you know, what's going on there, and how much do we need to know, and when, you know, when do we need to know it? There's a lot of stuff to keep up with. And that's not easy, but you know, if we wanted a field where things didn't change, we shouldn't have gone into tech.
Yep, that's well put. Well, I think, you know what, it's been a kind of wandering discussion on this article, but the point I was trying to make is that I think there's certain areas that are under stress, but on the other hand, there's other areas which are opening, and it's just that you've got to kind of keep your eye on the ball and figure out the areas that are growing. And if you're in an area that's compressing, you really got to have an exit strategy and move on to the next. And as you said, Sallie, that's part of technology, isn't it?
Right. And I think we all reach a point where it's just like, no, I'm too tired, I can't learn one more thing. And, you know, hopefully at that point you're in a position to retire or do something else without too much, you know, too much difficulty. But yeah, I mean, I think that's probably why John is noticing so many people who want to, you know, move into SEO is they're concerned that, the stuff they're already doing is there's less demand for it. It's less valuable. It's not going to work out for them. And, I think that's fine as long as they understand that they're not going to be able to just do SEO without having to, spend a lot of time and effort on really learning how it works. And, if SEO is what you pick to learn that way, fine. But, it's not necessarily going to be less work than learning React or learning, something else you need to know to do, a different type of technical work.
I think.
Agree.
Or
go in coaching.
Right. On to the next final story. Twitter bans political ads, says political speech should be earned, not bought. I think you suggested this one, Sallie. What did you think of this one?
Yeah, I found it. I forget where, but it was. I really think it was Media Post. They still email me once in a while with stories, and it's sort of like, this is a really interesting move. It is one of the first things that Twitter has done to really distinguish itself in quite a while. I don't know how well it will work. And of course, we do know that the people with political agendas will go, spend money on either having someone create bots or just paying people to post stuff. It's not as if we're going to not have any political material on Twitter all of a sudden. But I think as a response to Facebook basically saying you can put whatever you want in your political ad and we don't care, it is an interesting move.
The cynical side of me says, on the surface it seems great, but the cynical side of me says that, they do that because basically Twitter ads haven't been proven to be that effective. But I'm just talking out the backside of my backside there because I haven't done the research, but, compared to the variation of Facebook. So I think the adverts might work for certain fields. But, and also, basically Twitter, they don't put political adverts on Twitter. What they do is they get vault leaders or they get groups of Twitter accounts, and they bad actors spread misinformation through the natural feed, don't they? They don't exactly do
right. Well, I mean, people were doing that already. They'll probably just do more of it.
Keep doing
but
it.
I think the point is that Twitter is not going to make money off of people doing that.
That's true.
And as an ethical stance, it has some value. As a serious deterrent to false information in political ads, no, I'm not sure there is a force in the universe that will stop that.
And compared to what Mr. Facebook, his pronunciations in front of
Mark Facebook,
his performance in front of Congress, which was how shall we put it, not that inspiring, was it? What do you reckon, Johnny? Wasn't that inspiring, was it?
No, and Sheryl Sandberg.
I think it inspired a great deal of disgust.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing too, and like them saying, well, we're going to just run whatever we want, and it doesn't matter if it's misinformation. Basically, they want it to stay, Facebook wants it to stay chaotic, and they do not want government regulation. So for them, as long as whoever gets in puts no regulation on them, they're all for it because they will continue to make money. And they're talking about 1% isn't that much. It's $400 million. So it is a lot. Yeah, I mean, it's just, honestly.
Yeah, a billion here, a billion there. Pretty soon you're talking about real money.
To be regulated. Remember, Facebook started as Harvard Hot or Not. That's what it was.
It's an amazing story that something from such gross foundations can grow into.
I think it maybe says something about the nature of humanity.
But back to Twitter and Jack Dorsey too. I'm not convinced. I believe that this is just a PR move to counter Facebook.
I agree with you.
I don't believe that they really mean to clean up any better than Facebook does, because the fact of the matter is like Nazism, white supremacy, and stuff like that is they filter it out in countries where it must be. regulated because of the laws, like in Germany and France. They already filter it out, but they do not do it in the US. And they will continue to not do it in the US. So banning political speech is like one thing, but until they, and they're not going to ban the whole.
And it's not that hard, is it? Yeah. All you need is a rule saying you can say what you like.
They have 12-hour shifts in St. Petersburg of people amplifying the same things.
But what I'm saying, it's not hard to have the rule. You can say what you like, but when you physically threaten individuals with physical violence or encourage violence to groups through sex,
there's one very prominent account that does that.
When you do that, you're out. You will lose.
They haven't banned that account, so I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I mean. There's one big account that somebody we know that encourages extremism and violence, but they don't cut his account out.
Yeah, so I'm really skeptical about this. I think it's just PR.
And it's quite clear, it should be really very, very clear. They need some high-profile individuals on the left and right, but only they need. I think some of the Twitters. I forgot the name of the guy. It's a very big podcast. It has millions of people. He was a presenter in pro wrestling or something. You know the podcast, don't you, John?
Is it Rogan?
Rogan. He had some of the Twitter chief executives, some of the high people in Twitter.
Well, a lot of people say Joe Rogan's like a portal to
but true. But Rogan, their defense of their actual mechanisms about how they select which sites to ban, which Twitter accounts to ban, it was such a jumble of intellectual garbage that it was
but that's what I'm saying. At the end of it all, the people in Silicon Valley, like Jack Dorsey, Mark Zuckerberg, Sheryl Sandberg, Biz Stone, they do not care if democracy or the world itself burns to the ground as long as they keep making money.
That's about it. Right, on to something more cheerful. To wrap up the show, our recommendations. And I've actually got two. It's one I put down, but I'm going to add the other. First one is I use Zoom, folks, for most of my podcasting and my videos. And a guy's produced, I'm going to try it out, produced a plugin called Video Conferencing with Zoom AP. And what it enables you to do is embed the live Zoom feed onto a web page. So instead of just either having it show up on either Facebook or YouTube, you can actually push it. And panelists, if you have got your recommendations, can you put them into chat? It does really help me. But so you can push a live Zoom webinar onto a web page on your WordPress website. That's useful.
The note on the plugin says you can't do it with the webinar, only with the regular Zoom, and I haven't tried.
Oh, I did read that. I should read the notes. Thank
yes.
you. Oh well, that's
so
a scout.
Well, they need to. Yes. So it's sort of like I think they might need to work on that a little bit. I don't know. Maybe that one is meant to be left for the pro version or something.
I'll have to get my developers to do me a modification to it then. But I think that's probably because they are planning that's probably in the pro version anyway, isn't it? They are planning a pro version,
right? And that would make that would make sense to be something that would go in the pro version.
Well, I'll see how long it takes them to do the pro version. I'll get my own developers because they're I need that. I need it. My other recommendation is a TV series, and I don't watch much American television, and it's Mr. Robot. Series 4. I've watched the other series, and it kind of gels with me around hacking, the kind of people I knew in London. It kind of gels with me, Mr. Robot. It's a rather dark show. John's nodding his head. Do you watch it then, John?
No, I don't. I pretty much only watch what I can get online, so I don't really watch that much TV. I'm just kind of busy.
Well, I don't watch it. I just get the feed and I watch it on my tablet. But it's a great series about hacking, and the lead figure is to say he's conflicted would be a slight understatement. So it's interesting, and it's on its final series 4. Unlike some American series that are old, that seem to have a lifespan longer than most people.
This is the man who comes from the country that made like one of the longest running series ever, to wit, Doctor Who.
Oh, that's nothing. The Archers. I think the Archers is older than me. That's saying something.
Well, Doctor Who started in like the 40s or something,
No,
or the early 50s. It's very old. It's even older than Star Trek. I looked it up once.
Yeah, but we are talking about Doctor Who, aren't we? For God's sake. All right. Have you got so John? Have you got something you want to share with us?
Yeah, I do. And this is a YouTube channel I just discovered very recently. This is Andy Bertucci. And he makes animated memes that skewer the digital marketing culture. It's biting satire. Basically, I think most people would really dig it, but basically, it's just mocking satire of.
I'm looking at it now. Yes, why do entrepreneurs chase shiny objects? The death of a mad
it's
marketer.
Funny stuff.
Typical agency owners be like.
Typical agency owners. I mean, watch that video. That's stuff I see like every week in Facebook groups. It's exactly like that. Watch it, and I see that every week.
I'll have to go
I'm going to drop that one in the the entertaining stuff.
That's what we're up against. Yeah.
Package for the PR Slack.
What about you, Sallie? Have you got something you want to share with the listeners and viewers?
Yes, less humorous, but useful. There is an accessible color generator. And I came across this while, I have a client that runs basically various senior services. So you'd think like accessibility might be important. And they just had a bunch of new branding done and color palette. And I mentioned this when I talked to the designers at first, and still like most of their colors do not pass accessibility checks as backgrounds for buttons with white text. And visually, almost everybody prefers to have like white text on your color buttons than black text on your color buttons, unless the button is really, really light. And what this one does is it will give you a variation on your color that passes the test for large text and for small text. And in the case of this particular color palette, there were 3 or 4 of them where there was almost no visible difference between the color that passed and the color that didn't. And I said to my client, I said, can I just use the ones that pass on the website? It's nobody is going to notice the difference between that and, the print stuff. They've got a bunch of signage. And print just works differently because of luminosity issues and the fact that your screen glows at you. And so colors that are fine for print and certainly fine for something as large as a sign are not necessarily fine on your website. So I found this one really useful.
That's fantastic. Thanks for that. We're going to wrap up the show. It's been a small panel, the old timers, as we say. But I think we've done a good job. We breezed through all the stories. We'll be back next week, folks, hopefully with a larger panel. The truants will be coming back from there.
Well, yes, we'll get all the we'll get all the gossip from WordCamp US.
Yes. So we'll see you next week, beloved listeners and viewers. See you soon. Bye.
Bye.